Reconcile. Did you know 1 in 4 people are estranged from a family member, be that a parent, a child, a sibling, or a grandparent? That 1 in 4 of you has someone in your life that you no longer talk to or see. The story today is about that estrangement, right? Because what we know of this story is that Jacob did horrible things to Esau. Just terrible. First, he tricked him out of one form of inheritance. Then he tricked him out of a second form of inheritance. And then he didn't let Esau express his anger. He ran away. And he stayed away for 20 years. 20 years, the brothers had no contact. And so the story today is when they meet back up. But what does that look like and feel like? And what do we do with it in the scriptural text? So in the text, if you remember what happened, and we read some of it, but not all of it last week, Jacob and the family are on their way. And Jacob is sending lots and lots of gifts forward to Esau. Cattle, more sheep, lots of sheep. He keeps giving him things and sending a message, some of which may have been sent by the messengers or angels, to Esau, telling him where they could meet. And then Jacob has the night of wrestling with someone, himself, with God, with his brother, with a stranger. And he comes away with a limp. And he says that I have seen God's face, and he will never be the same because of that encounter. But here's the thing about it. Like, he sees Esau up in the distance because his men have told him that Esau is coming with 450 men behind him. So Jacob, who is the offender in this case? He's the one who has done wrong. He is the one that needs to seek and repent for his sins. He sees that in the distance, and so then he puts his wife and children on the other side of the river. Like, he separates him and puts them in between him and his brother. So then it gets to our story today, where now Jacob has crossed the river to meet his brother. And now they're lined up in order of importance. Now, some of the commentary is, well, maybe this is so they have to slaughter him all the way before they get to him. But it's mostly just symbolic. These are the ones that are the most important, and this is the child that will be the most important. So it starts out with the maids, and then their 2 children, and then it goes to Leah because she's not the favorite, and all of her sons and daughter. And then it goes to Rachel, the favorite, and then Joseph, the major favorite child. And then behind them is Jacob. And so Jacob doesn't know what's going to happen. So he runs out from behind all of them and bows down to his brother 7 times. But he doesn't say anything. He doesn't say, I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry that we haven't spoken in 20 years. I'm sorry that I took what I shouldn't have. He doesn't acknowledge the harm he has caused. But Esau, in this 20 years, must have had a change in the anger. Because that anger that came up, where he said he wanted to kill Jacob because he took one more thing from him, wasn't an anger that was really going to lead to, I'm going to kill my brother. How many of you at one point or another were that mad at a sibling? that you said something unkind and didn't want to have anything to do with them. But it's been 20 years. And so he has let that go, and so they come up and they reconcile. Esau comes up and hugs Jacob. But then it gets complicated, because Genesis is just complicated. So Esau wants to get to know the clan. And so he says, "Who are all these?" And Jacob introduces him to, pointing out what God has told him again and again, that these children are given to him because God has blessed them with the children. And so he introduces all his children, and then Esau says, "Come home with me. Come to me to the mountain." Now, we do know that God has sent Jacob to go to Bethel. So the mountain isn't Bethel. But the place he goes to also isn't Bethel. So he's on his way, but not there. And he's on his way, but not with Esau. Because Esau asked him more than once, in a couple different ways, to come with him. And Jacob makes excuses. "My sheep can't walk that fast. My children are really slow at walking. So we'll come on behind you." And then Esau says, "Well, let me keep some men with you to protect you." And Jacob again says, "No, it's okay. Go on ahead." So maybe he's still fearful that this is just a trap, that'll get to Esau's mountain and be attacked and lose everything. So instead, he and the children set off in a different direction. And they set off in a spot that first places them at the spot where they make booths to settle in for a while. And then they move on to Shechem. And then we have the rape of Diana. But they never go to the mountain. Jacob and Esau see each other again in chapter 35 when Isaac dies. So they come together for a funeral, but they don't come together to live. So that reconciliation is reconciliation, but sort of, right? Esau was ready to make that next step, and Jacob isn't. And there's a question here, at least among the Midrash from the Jewish tradition, is did they not reconcile because God doesn't want his people in Edom and doesn't want them to intermarry with the Edomites? So is this a bigger tale of people, of countries? Or is it a tale of the brothers? And what prevents that reconciliation? And in this case, the one who is harmed tried to fix things, and the one who is the harmer doesn't. I mean, he attempts to bribe him, but he doesn't trust him. And he lives up to his name Jacob, not his new name Israel, by again deceiving his brother, by saying, "Sure, we're coming behind you, we'll be behind you," but never getting there. So how do we deal with this question of reconciliation, and what does it look like when we are estranged from family, or when people are estranged from each other? So I want to take it in two routes. The first one I want to talk about is family estrangement. Now, one of the major authorities in this section is Joshua Coleman. He's a psychotherapist who when his daughter was in her 20s, she stopped talking to him. And He knew it was because of the divorce and the new family, and he said it was the most painful time in his life, and he had to figure out how to move beyond that estrangement. And so he researched it and figured out ways and started in his practice to deal with people who were dealing with estrangement, people who had been separated from family, a lot of parents from their children. He says that in the separation, over 80% of mothers end up reconciling and 70% of fathers. But there's still that 20 and 30% that never reconcile. And he talks about the causes of what leads to it. And he says, right now, one of the main problems is get off TikTok and Instagram. Because it says that on TikTok and Instagram, you will, if that is what you are experiencing, the algorithm is going to feed you videos again and again that tell you that estrangement is okay, that it's healthy, and it's what you need to do. And he doesn't say that we should all reconcile for everything. Like he says, there are some abuses that happen within families that it is okay to not reconcile with the person, but you need to work on healing yourself. So he argues that if you've been sexually abused, there may be no reconciliation, and should not be any reconciliation. But you need to heal yourself. And he talks about what does it look like? What is needed? And what he says is that our culture has changed a bit. That for the silent generation, boomers and Gen X, our childhoods were very different from the childhoods of our kids and grandkids. That our parents were more likely to hit us or punish us in very dramatic ways than what is acceptable in culture today. And so when boomers and Gen X try to talk to their children and grandchildren, they're talking about across cultures, where when a child says, this really hurts, the parent says, well, you should have seen what my parents did to me. And yet they're not listening to each other, right? The parent can't hear that this hurt. And so he argues one of the first steps is you have to empathize. It doesn't matter that your situation was worse. You're not trying to deal with your parent. That's for your therapy session on your own. You're trying to deal with what is your child experiencing, or what is your brother experiencing, in this case, of our story. That's the relationship you're trying to heal. And so you need to hear what they're saying and let your stuff be fixed somewhere else. Because they need to know that you actually heard them. And that you're willing to change because you heard the story. And one of the important things he says is that you have to make amends. That you have to give a sincere apology before what has done, what you have done. And it can't be just an I'm sorry. It's an acknowledgement of what was internally in you that led this to happen and the harm that you caused them, because the focus is the person who feels harmed, not you. He says it's not about debating and complaining. It's about really seeing the other person. And so at one level, our story is about that. How do you heal the relationship between family members? Because Jacob never heals his relationship, he perpetuates it down to the next generation. He continues it on with his own kids, with his own kids being so pitted against each other that they throw one of them in a pit and sell him into slavery. But the story is also about a people that are divided with the people that live next door. And so one of the people that speaks the most to that kind of pain is the late Bishop Desmond Tutu. He says this: forgiving and being reconciled to our enemies or loved ones is not about pretending that things are other than they are. It is about patting one another. It's not about patting one another on the back or turning a blind eye to the wrong. True reconciliation exposes the awfulness, the abuse, the hurt, the truth. It could even sometimes make things worse. It is a risky undertaking, but in the end, it is worthwhile. Because in the end, only an honest confrontation with reality can bring real healing. Superficial reconciliation can bring only superficial healing. So what happened in South Africa that makes them the model of how we should deal with the concept of reconciliation? There were a lot of horrible things that happened under apartheid. They heard stories under the Truth and Reconciliation Committee about people being killed and having a barbecue while they're burning the body. They heard stories of harm after harm after harm, about death and the pain inflicted on others, about the violence that occurred from both sides. And then people will get mad at the judge because he didn't do what they thought he should do. Because their goal was for anybody who caused such trauma and pain to be put away forever. They are monsters and don't deserve to be out in public. But the judge, so his process in this is to reveal the truth and figure out how to rebuild the community. And that meant people had to learn how to change and be given the opportunity to change. And as Tutu says, there were no quick solutions, no shortcuts, no easy road. Because what they were searching for was the African concept of Ubuntu. The idea that is at the essence of what it means to be human, to say that a person is a person because of the community they are part of. He argues that we are made for togetherness, to live in a delicate network of interdependence. I need other human beings in order to be human myself. I would not know how to walk and talk and think, behave as a human person except by learning it all from other humans. For Ubuntu, the greatest good is harmony. Anger, hatred, resentment are all the corrosive of this good. If one person is dehumanized, then inexplicably all others are diminished and dehumanized in turn. So in this story of Jacob and Esau, we have a people that now start the battle. I mean, some of these stories are told to explain to us what happens later on. But what Tutu argues is that if you get stuck in that cycle of thinking that those people are wrong and you are right, that everything they have done is horrible, but the bad deeds you have done isn't, you will never get out of the cycle. You will never bring that communal togetherness back together. So he ends one of his speeches by telling the story of Peter and Linda Beale. They were an American couple whose daughter Amy was a Fulbright scholar and was killed brutally by stoning by a mob of young blacks, chanting the blood-curdling slogan, "One settler, one bullet." The problem is Amy was a Fulbright scholar who was there wasn't a South African, was there to fight apartheid and to bring healing in the spaces she could. Her mother attended the amnesty hearing of the 4 young blacks who were serving sentences for their part in the murder. And the Beale and Mrs. Beale spoke up in favor of granting amnesty. Not only did she argue for amnesty, but they set up a foundation in their daughter's name to try to save as many black youth from violence and the township ghetto that was leading them to have little to nothing. Their daughter's murderers then worked for the organization, which was doing development work in townships where their daughter had been murdered. They were giving new beginnings to new people. He says one of the most moving scenes was when the mothers met. When the mother of Amy Beale met the mother of one of the offenders who killed her. That when these 2 mothers united by this awful tragedy embraced, one white, the other black, one South African, the other American, bound by the bond of humanity, the bond of Ubuntu, connected by their essential humanity, and the mothers embracing with tears streaming down their faces, speaking of the possibility of forgiveness and reconnection, the possibility of new beginnings, of healing and restoration, of life out of death. The Sermon on the Mount speaks again and again of reconciliation. In fact, it says, before you place your offering in the offering plate, I want you to go and make peace with your brother or sister that you have harmed, and then you can come bring your offering. Jesus tells us again and again that reconciliation, that loving our enemies and loving our neighbors and being part of a community means learning to live together in the messiness of humanity, but in the messiness that is changed and transformed because we're being a new community in a different way. So in this story of Jacob and Esau, where it is completely complicated and has no good resolution, part of me wanted to end with that image. To stop there and not move forward so you didn't know it got bad afterwards. But maybe that image is their first step, can be our first step. That we can have that first step of saying, I know I've done wrong. And just know when you take that first step, you're going to have to take that step over and over and over again. Because it isn't easy to give up your resentments, to give up the patterns that you have created in your brain. But it's possible, it's necessary, and it's important work for all of us. Amen.